What is up, guys? Snapback Mage here, bringing you a Frontier deck tech, which is super sweet. Before we get into this deck tech, I imagine you're here because you are wanting to build this deck, and if you're going to get into Frontier, just realize it can be a little spendy, so I have offered a budget version at the end of the video, so stay tuned to that. It's still very competitive. The original version's right around $450 to the $500 range, whereas the budget version's at $170, and it's still really competitive, so stay tuned for that. If you're not willing to spend that, I totally understand. Also, make sure you do a lot of research on the deck, and make sure you're going to get something that you enjoy and is fun. That's the most important part. I happen to have went out and bought this deck and play tested it, and I just think it's a blast. Take my word for it, it is just so much fun. If you guys have ever played any Aristocrats deck or the Rights deck that was recently in Standard, we all know how Nantuko Husk and Zulaport can be and how much fun they are to play, especially with Collected Company and Rally. It's just broken, and it's a lot of fun, so let's get it right into the deck tech. For our 2-drops, we have Baby Jace himself. So what this deck is basically trying to do, if we're talking about living the dream terms, is turn 1, play a fetch land, probably grab a blue source, turn 2, play another fetch land, grab a green source, drop Jace down, and hopefully he doesn't get killed, setting us up for our next 2-drop, which is Satyr Wayfinder. Satyr Wayfinder, when it enters a battlefield, you get to reveal the top 4 cards of your library. We get to put a land card, so we can grab a fetch land, a Battle for Zendikar land, or even a basic land, put it into our hand, setting up maybe a turn 4 Collected Company, so we're not going to be missing land drops there, which is really great. And then most importantly, you put the rest of those cards that were revealed into the graveyard. So Jace is going to be able to flip turn 3, which is so good. I can't explain how powerful this is. So if your Jace lives, you're going to be living the dream. Basically, the goal with Jace is to minus their dorks, of course, with this +1, but more importantly, -3 and be able to flashback a Collected Company. So say if we're living the dream, which, you know, we're living the dream, basically say Wayfinder is going to grab you land, it's going to mill a Collected Company, Jace is going to flip, then next turn, you're going to minus Jace and play the Collected Company. That's card advantage, it's great. We're going to be able to swarm the board with our creatures and have a very explosive start. That's living the dream sense. It's not going to happen every time, but we do have a lot of great cards in this deck that will help us set up for that. So let's talk about our next 2-drop, which is Elvish Visionary, which is basically just a 2-mana 1/1 elf that when it enters the battlefield, you get a draw card. So drawing a card for 2 mana doesn't seem that great, but when you get a scry off the sack, or you get to drain your opponent or draw a card, it gets a lot better. Collected Company and drawing 2 cards, getting 2 bodies on the field. I mean, that's not the best Collected Company hit, but this card is just so much fun to play because it replaces itself, and it's a 1/1 dork. I mean, who doesn't want to play this card? I absolutely love it. Up next, we have the funnest cards to play in the deck, which is our combo creatures, and these are a lot of fun. First up, we have the baddie himself, Zulaport Cutthroat. If you've never heard of him, he's a 1 and a black. Whenever Zulaport Cutthroat or another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. So essentially our combo is to drain our opponent to death, gain a bunch of life, and we also have other cards that allow us to get some advantage out of bodies, such as Catacomb Sifter. When Catacomb Sifter enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion token on the battlefield. It has sacrifice, add 1 mana to your mana pool, which is super cool. We get to play him and ramp ourselves up for next turn, or even sack the Scion in our upkeep and scry before we draw a card, which is super cool, or even sack it before we collect a company and make sure we hit what we need. I absolutely love this card. Our sack outlet is Nantuko Husk himself, which is 1 black and 2. Sacrifice a creature, Nantuko Husk gets +2/+2 until end of turn, so we can instant speed sack whatever we want. Our spells are at instant speed. This deck is just an instant speed deck. I love it. It's a lot of fun. Our next card is Grim Haruspex. We're only going to be playing one of these guys, but he's just so great. What we're trying to do is collect a company into him. We don't want to run him out because he screams kill me now. And it's whenever another non-token creature dies that you control, draw a card. So basically we can manipulate the stack, sack our board, scry, and draw cards with Catacomb Sifter and Grim Haruspex. It's super cool, a lot of fun. I was play testing it, and sometimes you get to sack your whole board, drain them, crippling them, and refill your hand, or even just sack a couple cards and dig for a Collected Company. It's a lot of fun. This card is just, it's the bee's knees. I would play him more, but we just need these other cards. It helps us be more consistent. I proxied out a couple more of the Grims, and he's great and all. He's a lot of fun. He's super exciting when we get him on the battlefield, but he's not what we want all the time. So those are basically our combo creatures. I love them. Let's get into the nasty cards. So these are the nastiest cards in the deck, which they are recently banned Reflector Mage, which, if you've never heard of Reflector Mage, it's when it enters the battlefield, your opponent can't play things on its next turn because you return their creature to their hand, and they have to sit there and hold that creature, and it is the most frustrating thing to ever have to deal with. And when it comes at instant speed, it can just be nasty. We can have set up tricky blocks for our combat phase, and just do some really, really nasty things with Reflector Mage. Collected Company, we all know what that does. Look at the top 6. Put 2 creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less among them onto the battlefield, the rest at the bottom of your library. So instant speed, basically combo off and win the game. That's what we're trying to do. The next card is Rally of the Ancestors, which hasn't been in standard for a bit, but Rally is so good. If you haven't heard of it, it's 2 white and X, and the X most of the time is going to be 3 or even 2, but 3 because nothing in this deck creature-wise is going to cost more than 3. And we can return creature card with converted, or each creature card with converted mana cost X or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. Exile those creatures at the beginning of your next upkeep, and exile Rally of the Ancestors. So what we're trying to do is cast this maybe when they're swinging at us, or instant speed when they're tapped out. Return everything, draw a bunch of cards with Elvish Visionary, mill ourselves, get a land, drain them, scry, draw cards. So even against control decks where they're killing our creatures, that's okay because we are going to rally with them. And it doesn't matter if they get exiled because most likely we're going to be throwing those cards in our graveyard for value. So it's like Collected Company, but temporarily and even more nasty in some ways. So this card is the MVP of the deck. It's super cheap, 50 cents a pop or even cheaper if you look hard enough, and it's going to be in the budget version for sure. Next we have our lands, which is the basic BFZ lands, which is Sunken Hollow, Prairie, and Canopy Vista in our colors. And we also have, for our fetch lands, Flooded Strand, Polluted Delta, and Windswept Heath. Flooded Strand is going to be cut for the budget version, which is okay because sometimes these fetches can be expensive and it can be a little anti-synergistic, but it's still something that we're going to do for the budget version. And don't worry, I've playtested it. It's still really, really competitive. So let's talk about the budget version. So here we have the budget version. Basically, we're going to be cutting out the Jace, Vryn's Prodigies. I totally understand if you don't want to spend $160 on Jace, Vryn's Prodigy. Only a maniac would do that, aka me. But I totally get it, and we're going to be replacing it with a great card. If you guys saw LSV play the Crypto with Right sack deck with Liliana, Heretical Healer, you guys will understand that she is a powerhouse, and you can buy a playset of her for $22. So for half a Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, you can get your Planeswalker in this deck. And she's a double black, 2/3 lifelinker, and when you sack a non-token creature or a non-token creature dies, you get a flipper, which is great because we can do that at will with Nantuko Husk, and that feels good to be able to flip her. And then when she flips, you get a 2/2 zombie, so you get another body, and you get a Planeswalker, and her plus is each player discards a card, which is totally fine because we're trying to get rid of our cards. We have rallies, discard a creature. Her minus X is return target creature with X converted mana cost to the battlefield. This is great. We can grab a creature, maybe a Catacomb Sifter, and get even more bodies. I just love this synergy that it has. It's great. We're not really losing that much power. I understand that Jace is a powerhouse, but Liliana is just, she's great. She's great value. She's not going to slow you down that much. We did talk about the Living the Dream and those explosive plays, but Liliana will get the job done. I really like her. Plus, she's a 2/3 body, and who doesn't like that? Next is we're cutting the Collected Companies. If you guys cannot cut the Collected Companies, try not to, but I get it. Not everyone wants to spend $50+ on Collected Companies. It makes sense to me. So we can cut them if you have to, but that's like the last thing I would cut. Basically, if you do cut them, we're replacing them with Siege Rhino. Siege Rhino is a great, great card. I love this card. And you guys are probably thinking, Siege Rhino, what? That's like high on the curve. Like, we're trying to do little creatures and sack our stuff. But when you rally for 4 and you get 2 to 3 Siege Rhinos and drain them for, 12 at the most, and you gain 12, it feels really, really good. I was playtesting it, and I noticed that even returning a couple Siege Rhinos is just gross. You got 4 or 5 Tramplers, and it's just nasty, I'm telling you guys. So don't be scared if you can't afford the Collected Companies. You can still have a very, very competitive deck with the Siege Rhinos. It's dope. Next, we are cutting the Flooded Strands. See, if we're not playing Jace, we don't really need the fetch lands. I mean, we need some, but we don't need all of them. And I get it that it's mathematically better to thin out your deck and get those creatures. But I totally understand if you don't want to buy the Flooded Strands. We do need the Polluted Deltas and the Windswept Heaths, just from playtesting I see. And we can basically replace those with Pain Lands, Hissing Quagmires, or even the blue-green Hexproof land if you have a lot of control in your meta, which those are all great. They do come in tapped, but still, I don't know, I just love Hissing Quagmire. It's great. We can turn it into a creature and sack. There was times where I was playing the Rights deck in Standard, and I would activate my Hissing Quagmire. Secretly, they were thinking, maybe I have holding up a Collected Company, because this deck will die to Kalitas, and they'll swing with their Kalitas, and you'll get them with the Hissing Quagmire. So there's other lands that you can use. The mana, this is just like top tier mana, so don't worry if you can't afford top tier mana. Not everyone can do it. It's super expensive. But if you can, by all means, do it. That would probably be the second thing I cut out after the Jaces before the Collected Companies, just because Collected Company is so good. Like I said, the budget version will cost you around $170, and the non-budget version upwards to $400 to $500, depending on how much it goes up by the end of the video. I noticed that cards are kind of climbing as Frontier increased. So remember to leave a like and subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, because I'm going to be trying to do these once a week. I'm a college student and I'm busy, but I like deck techs and I want to do all sorts of formats. So if you guys want to see anything, let me know. I love building decks and testing them. And net decking. I love net decking and net decking powerful decks and playing and getting those interactions. I know a lot of people don't like that, but hey, you got to get better and you got to play those cards to get better. So I hope you guys liked the video, and peace out and see you next time.